Lydia stood in front of the mirror, took a deep breath, and whispered, "I can do this." But when she opened her mouth to speak English, the words just wouldn't come out. Have you ever felt the same way? Welcome to the Fluent Storybook. Here, we help you improve your English through simple, engaging stories. Today, we'll follow Ava's journey as she discovers 5 powerful ways to speak English with confidence. So the following 5 ways are very important for spoken English. 1. Lydia starts speaking with simple words and short sentences. Lydia had always admired people who could speak English fluently. She watched them with fascination, the way their words flowed easily, their confidence shining through every sentence. But whenever she tried to speak, she felt like her tongue was tied in knots. It wasn't that she didn't know English. She had learned it in school for years. She knew grammar rules, she could write sentences, and she even understood when others spoke. But speaking? That was a different challenge. Every time she opened her mouth, she hesitated, afraid she might say something wrong. Her biggest fear was making mistakes in front of people. She imagined them laughing or correcting her, and the thought alone was enough to keep her silent. So, she avoided speaking English as much as possible. In class, when her teacher asked a question in English, she lowered her gaze, hoping she wouldn't be called on. When she went to stores or restaurants, she let her parents or friends do the talking. She felt safe that way, but deep down, she knew it wasn't helping her improve. One day, her English teacher, Mr. Carter, noticed her struggle. After class, he called her aside. "Lydia, I see that you understand English well, but you rarely speak. Why is that?" he asked gently. Lydia hesitated. I don't know," she said softly, though she knew exactly why. Mr. Carter smiled. "I think I do. You're afraid of making mistakes, aren't you?" She nodded. "That's normal," he assured her. "But let me tell you something. Fluency isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave. And the best way to start is with small words and short sentences. You don't have to say long, complicated things. Just start small." Lydia thought about his words all evening. Small words? Short sentences? Maybe that was something she could try. The next day, when she went to a cafe with her friend Emily, she decided to challenge herself. Usually, she let Emily order for both of them. But this time, she took a deep breath and said, "1 coffee, please." It was just 3 words, but to her it felt like a big step. The barista smiled and asked, "Do you want milk and sugar?" For a second, Lydia panicked. She hadn't expected a response. Her mind raced, trying to translate the words into her native language. Then she remembered Mr. Carter's advice. Keep it simple. "Yes, milk, please," she said quickly. It wasn't a perfect sentence, but it was understandable. The barista nodded and prepared her coffee. Lydia felt a small thrill. She had spoken English in a real situation, and nothing bad had happened. No one had laughed. No one had corrected her. It was a tiny success, but it gave her hope. Encouraged by this, Lydia decided to keep going. She started practicing small sentences every day. In the morning, when she saw her neighbor, instead of just waving, she said, "Good morning." When she went to the grocery store, she made herself ask, "Where is the bread?" She forced herself to say something in English each day, even if it was just a single word. At first, it felt unnatural. Her sentences were short and sometimes awkward. But with time, something incredible happened. She stopped thinking so much before speaking. The words came out faster, more naturally. One afternoon, Lydia and Emily went to the park. They sat on a bench, enjoying the sunshine, when a tourist approached them. "Excuse me," the woman said. "Do you know where the nearest bookstore is?" Lydia felt her heart pound. Normally, she would have let Emily answer, but today, something was different. She had been practicing. She could do this. She took a deep breath and said, "Yes. The bookstore is on Main Street. Walk straight, then turn right." The woman smiled. "Thank you so much." Lydia's face lit up. She had done it. She had spoken English to a stranger and helped them. Emily nudged her playfully. "See? You're getting better." That evening, Lydia reflected on her progress. She had started with just a few words, and now she was giving directions in English. It felt like a victory, but she also knew she had a long way to go. Still, she faced one big problem. She wasn't speaking enough. Saying short sentences to strangers was helpful, but it wasn't enough practice. She needed someone to talk to regularly, someone who wouldn't judge her mistakes. She needed a speaking partner, and that's where Emily came in. 2. Practicing English every day with a speaking partner. That night, Lydia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment at the park in her mind. She had done it. She had spoken English to a stranger, and it had felt amazing. But the excitement faded as another thought crept in. Was this enough? Saying short sentences here and there was good, but it wasn't making her truly fluent. She wanted to speak naturally. She wanted the words to flow effortlessly, just like they did for Emily. She sighed. Maybe she was expecting too much. Maybe some people were just born good at languages, and she wasn't one of them. But then she remembered something Mr. Carter had said. Fluency isn't about talent. It's about practice. If she wanted to get better, she had to practice every day, and that meant finding a way to speak more often. The next morning, Lydia met Emily at their favorite coffee shop. As they sipped their drinks, Lydia hesitated before finally saying, Emily, I need your help. Emily looked up. Of course. What's up? Lydia took a deep breath. I want to practice speaking English every day, but I don't know how. Emily's eyes lit up. That's great. You're already doing so well. But yeah, speaking every day will help you improve faster. Have you thought about finding a speaking partner? Lydia frowned. A speaking partner? Yes. Someone you can talk to in English every day. It could be a friend, a teacher, even someone online. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll get. Lydia thought for a moment. I don't know. I don't really have anyone to talk to in English. My family doesn't speak it much, and in class we mostly focus on writing. Emily grinned. Then talk to me. Lydia blinked. You? Why not? We already hang out all the time. From now on, whenever we're together, let's speak only in English. No matter what. Lydia felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Speaking with Emily was different from talking to strangers. With strangers, she could say a few words and be done. But with Emily, she'd have to keep the conversation going. What if she got stuck? What if she didn't know the right words? Emily seemed to sense her hesitation. She reached out and squeezed Lydia's hand. Don't worry. I won't judge you. Just try your best. If you don't know a word, describe it. If you make a mistake, keep going. The most important thing is that you keep talking. Lydia nodded slowly. Okay, let's try. That afternoon, they walked through the park, speaking only in English. At first, it was hard. Lydia kept stopping mid-sentence, struggling to find words. Yesterday, I went to, what's the word? The place with books? The library? Emily offered. Yes, the library. I went there. Emily smiled. See? You found a way to say it. That's the trick. If you don't know the exact word, describe it. Lydia nodded, feeling a little more confident. They kept walking, and little by little, the words started coming more easily. She still made mistakes, but she didn't let them stop her. Over the next few weeks, speaking English with Emily became a daily habit. At first, it felt strange. Lydia had to push herself to speak instead of just listening. Sometimes, she'd get frustrated when she couldn't find the right words. But Emily was patient, always encouraging her to keep going. One day, as they sat in the cafe, Emily grinned. Lydia, you're getting so much better. You don't even stop to think as much anymore. Lydia laughed. Really? Yeah. Do you remember how nervous you were the first time you ordered coffee? And now, you're telling me full stories about your day. Lydia smiled, feeling a rush of pride. She had improved. She was speaking more naturally, using longer sentences without freezing up. But she still faced one problem. She only spoke English when she was with Emily. What about when she was alone? That night, as she brushed her teeth, she looked in the mirror and decided to try something new. She took a deep breath and said out loud, Today was a good day. I spoke English a lot. It felt strange at first talking to herself, but she kept going. I ate lunch with Emily. We talked about school. We laughed a lot. She smiled at her reflection. Maybe talking to herself in English could be another way to practice. The next day, she told Emily about her new idea. Emily's eyes widened. That's genius. It's called self-talk. A lot of language learners do it. You can practice anytime, anywhere. Just describe what you're doing or what you're thinking. Lydia felt excited. That meant no more waiting for someone to practice with. She could speak English anytime. From that day on, she started speaking to herself in English whenever she was alone. In the morning, she'd say, "I am making breakfast. I will eat toast." Before bed, she'd reflect, "Today I learned a new word." At first, it felt silly, but the more she did it, the more confident she became. One afternoon, while walking home, Lydia realized something incredible. She was thinking in English. Instead of translating from her native language, the words were just coming to her naturally. She couldn't believe it. Just a few weeks ago, she had been scared to speak at all. And now, English was becoming a part of her daily life. That evening, she met Emily at the cafe. "Guess what?" she said excitedly. "I was walking home, and I realized I was thinking in English." Emily's eyes lit up. "Lydia, that's amazing. That means your brain is getting used to the language. You're on your way to fluency." Lydia grinned. She still had a long way to go, but for the first time, she truly believed she could become fluent. And now, she was ready for the next step, using English in her daily activities, even with people who didn't normally speak it. 3. Using English in daily activities to make learning fun. Lydia felt proud of herself. Speaking with Emily every day had changed her confidence. She was no longer afraid to speak in English. She had even started talking to herself in English when she was alone, and it was helping her think in the language. But something still bothered her. She only spoke English in certain situations, with Emily, at the cafe, or when she was alone in front of a mirror. What about the rest of the day? She spent so much time not using English. At home, she spoke her native language. At school, she only used English in class, but not outside of it. It wasn't enough. If she really wanted to be fluent, she needed to use English all the time. One morning, as she sat in her room, scrolling through her phone, she had an idea. She opened her settings and changed her phone's language to English. Immediately, everything looked different. Her apps, her notifications, even her texts. She clicked on her messages and saw, "Emily, want to meet at the cafe?" She smiled. Just this small change made her feel like she was living in English. That day, she met Emily as usual, but this time, she had something new to say. "Guess what I did?" she asked excitedly. "What?" Emily asked, taking a sip of her coffee. "I changed my phone to English. Now I have to read everything in English, even my messages." Emily's eyes widened. "That's amazing. It's a great way to immerse yourself in the language." Lydia nodded. "But I want to do more. I want to make English a part of my whole life, not just when I'm talking to you." Emily thought for a moment. Then she grinned. "Let's make it fun. We can turn it into a challenge." Lydia raised an eyebrow. "A challenge?" "Yes. We'll find creative ways to use English in daily life. No boring grammar exercises, just fun, real-life stuff." Lydia loved the idea. If learning felt like a game, it wouldn't feel like studying at all. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it. But what should I do first?" Emily tapped her chin. "How about starting with labels?" Lydia frowned. "Labels?" "Yes. You can write English words on sticky notes and put them around your house. For example, stick mirror on your mirror, door on your door, lamp on your lamp. It'll help you learn new words without even trying." Lydia's eyes lit up. "That sounds fun. I'll do it today." That evening, when she got home, she grabbed a stack of sticky notes and a pen. She walked around her room, labeling everything she could. Bed, window, closet, bookshelf, chair. By the time she finished, her room looked like an English classroom. She giggled, feeling like a teacher. The next morning, when she woke up, the first thing she saw was the word ceiling on a sticky note above her bed. She smiled. Without even thinking, she said out loud, "I am looking at the ceiling." It was working, but she didn't stop there. She decided to take the challenge even further. At breakfast, she asked her little brother, "Do you want to play a game?" Her brother, who was only 8 years old, looked at her suspiciously. "What kind of game?" "An English game. I'll teach you words, and we'll only say them in English." Her brother groaned. "Ugh, school stuff?" "No, it'll be fun. If you win, I'll give you a prize." His eyes lit up. "What prize?" She smiled. "I'll do your chores for a day." "Deal," he shouted. And just like that, they turned breakfast into a game. Lydia pointed at things on the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Plate? Good. And this?" "Spoon." Soon, their whole conversation was in English. Her parents watched in surprise, but didn't stop them. By the time she left for school, she realized something important. English didn't have to be something separate from her life. It could be part of everything she did. The next step of her challenge was watching English shows and listening to English music. That evening, instead of watching her favorite TV show in her native language, she switched to an English one. At first, it was difficult. The characters spoke too fast, and she couldn't catch every word. But she didn't give up. She turned on subtitles and focused on listening. She started watching cartoons because they used simpler English. She also listened to songs in English and tried to sing along. The first time, she messed up almost every word. But after a few tries, she started understanding the lyrics better. At school, Emily noticed the change. "Lydia, your English is getting so much better. You sound more natural when you talk." Lydia beamed. "I think it's because I'm using English all the time now. I even think in English more." Emily clapped her hands. "That's exactly how you learn fast. And guess what? I have another idea." Lydia grinned. "Tell me." "Start writing in English. Keep a little diary and write about your day. Even if it's just a few sentences, it'll help you think in English." Lydia loved the idea. That night, she opened a notebook and wrote her first diary entry. "Today was a great day. I spoke a lot of English. I played a game with my brother. I watched a cartoon. I am learning fast." She smiled as she read her own words. She wasn't just learning English anymore, she was living it. And with every small step, she felt more confident. But she knew she wasn't done yet. There was one more thing she had to do: talk to people in English outside of her comfort zone. 4. Overcoming fear and speaking to new people in English. Lydia had come a long way. She could feel it in the way she thought in English more often, in the way she understood songs without needing to translate them in her head, and in the way she could chat with Emily so easily now. Even writing in her diary had become a habit. English wasn't just something she studied anymore. It was part of her daily life. But there was one thing she still struggled with: talking to strangers in English. She had no problem speaking with Emily. They had been practicing for weeks, and Emily was patient. She never made Lydia feel embarrassed. But the idea of talking to other people, people she didn't know well, made her heart race. What if she made a mistake? What if they laughed at her? What if she froze and couldn't find the right words? Lydia knew she couldn't avoid it forever. If she really wanted to be fluent, she had to be able to talk to anyone. One afternoon, as she and Emily sat in their favorite cafe, Emily seemed to read her mind. "You know, Lydia, your English has improved so much," she said, stirring her iced coffee. "But you need to take the next step." Lydia looked up. "What step?" "Talking to other people in English," Emily said with a smile. Lydia felt her stomach tighten. "Other people?" Emily nodded. "You can't just speak with me forever. You need to practice with real-life situations. Imagine if you go to a new city or travel somewhere. You'll have to talk to strangers. The more you do it now, the easier it'll be later." Lydia sighed. She knew Emily was right, but it still felt scary. "Okay," she said finally. "But how do I start?" Emily grinned. "Let's make it a challenge, just like before." Lydia raised an eyebrow. "A challenge?" "Yes. Every day, you have to speak to at least one new person in English. It could be a small conversation, even just saying hello. But you have to do it." Lydia hesitated. The idea made her nervous. But she also knew that fear was the only thing holding her back. She had come this far. She couldn't stop now. "All right," she said. "I'll try." The next day, Lydia went to the cafe alone for the first time. Usually, Emily was with her, helping her feel comfortable. But today, Lydia had decided she would do something she had never done before: order in English by herself. As she stood in line, she could feel her hands sweating. She repeated the words in her head. "Hi, I'd like an iced coffee, please." It was a simple sentence. She had said it with Emily many times. But now, standing there alone, she felt like she might forget everything. The line moved forward. There was only one person ahead of her. "You can do this," she told herself. Finally, it was her turn. The cashier, a young woman with a friendly smile, looked at her. "Hi, What can I get for you today? Lydia took a deep breath. Hi. I'd like an iced coffee, please. The words came out smoothly, just like she had practiced. The cashier nodded. Great. What size? Lydia's mind went blank. She hadn't thought about this part. The cashier waited patiently. Lydia felt panic creeping in. She wanted to switch to her native language, but she stopped herself. She had to push through. She quickly thought of the word she knew. Medium, please. The cashier smiled. That'll be $4.50. Lydia handed over the money, received her change, and stepped aside to wait for her drink. She had done it. It was a small conversation, but she had spoken to a stranger in English, and she had survived. As she walked out of the cafe, she felt a rush of confidence. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. That night, she wrote in her diary, Today I ordered my coffee in English all by myself. I was nervous, but I did it. I won't be afraid next time. Talking to shop assistants. After her cafe victory, Lydia decided to try something harder. She wanted to ask a question in English, not just say a sentence she had memorized, but actually start a conversation. She went to a clothing store and walked around, pretending to look at different shirts. Her heart pounded as she thought about what to say. Finally, she took a deep breath and approached a shop assistant. Excuse me, she said, her voice slightly shaking. The assistant turned to her with a smile. Yes? Lydia swallowed her fear. Do you have this shirt in a smaller size? The assistant nodded. Let me check for you. As the assistant walked away, Lydia felt her hands shaking. She had done it again. She had asked a question in English. And the best part? She had understood the answer. A minute later, the assistant returned. Yes, we do. Here you go. Lydia smiled. Thank you so much. She walked out of the store feeling powerful. Every time she spoke in English, the fear got smaller. One evening, as she sat with Emily in the park, she saw a woman sitting on a bench, reading a book. The woman looked friendly, and Lydia had an idea. I think I should try talking to a stranger, she whispered to Emily. Emily grinned. Yes, go for it. Lydia hesitated. But what do I say? Start with a simple question, Emily suggested. Ask her what book she's reading. Lydia took a deep breath and walked over to the woman. Her heart pounded in her chest. Excuse me, she said softly. The woman looked up and smiled. Yes. Lydia pointed at the book. What book are you reading? The woman's face lit up. Oh, it's a mystery novel. I love mystery books. Do you like reading? Lydia was shocked. The conversation was continuing. She nodded. Yes, I like reading too. They talked for a few more minutes about books before Lydia said goodbye and walked back to Emily. I did it, she whispered. Emily hugged her. You're amazing, Lydia. You're really speaking English in the real world now. Lydia smiled. She wasn't just learning English anymore. She was using it. Her fear wasn't gone yet, but she had proved to herself that she could do it. And tomorrow, she would do it again. 5. Gaining confidence and speaking fluently in English. Lydia sat on her bed, staring at her diary. The pages were filled with her journey of learning English. The struggles, the small victories, and the moments when she had wanted to give up. She flipped through the pages and smiled as she read her own words. Today, I ordered my coffee in English all by myself. I asked a shop assistant a question, and I understood the answer. I started a conversation with a stranger in the park. Looking back, she realized something. She wasn't the same girl who had once been afraid to speak. The fear wasn't as strong anymore. She still felt nervous sometimes, but she had learned how to push through it. She had spent weeks practicing with Emily, speaking in English every day, learning new words, and forcing herself to step out of her comfort zone. But now, she was ready for the final step, speaking fluently and naturally without overthinking every word. Lydia closed her diary and took a deep breath. She had come so far, but could she really call herself fluent now? She wasn't sure, but there was only one way to find out. The next morning, Lydia woke up with a new challenge in her mind. She would spend the entire day speaking only in English. No switching to her native language, no avoiding difficult words, just pure English as naturally as she could. She called Emily right away. Emily, today I want to speak only in English. All day. Emily gasped dramatically. Lydia, that's amazing. I love this idea. Let's go out and test your skills in the real world. Lydia laughed nervously. Okay, but where should we go? Let's do something fun, Emily said. What if we go to a bookstore? You can practice talking about books again, and maybe we'll meet new people. Lydia hesitated. She still felt a little nervous about speaking to strangers. But then she reminded herself of how much she had improved. This was the final challenge, the last step toward fluency. She took a deep breath. All right, let's go. At the bookstore, Lydia felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had been in similar situations before, but this time was different. This time, she wanted to have a full conversation, not just ask simple questions. As she browsed the books, she saw a woman standing nearby, flipping through the pages of a novel. She looked friendly, and Lydia saw an opportunity. She turned to Emily. I want to start a conversation with her. Emily grinned. Go for it. Lydia took a deep breath and walked over. Hi, she said with a smile. Are you looking for a new book to read? The woman looked up and smiled. Yes, I love reading, but I can never decide what to pick. Do you like books? Lydia nodded. Yes, I really like books. I think reading helps me learn new words in English. The woman's eyes lit up. Oh, that's great. Are you learning English? Yes, Lydia said confidently. I've been practicing a lot. I want to speak fluently. The woman smiled warmly. Well, you're doing an amazing job. Your English is really good. Lydia felt a rush of happiness. She was really doing it. She was having a natural conversation with a native speaker, and she wasn't panicking. They talked for a few more minutes about their favorite books, and when Lydia finally walked back to Emily, her heart was bursting with pride. Emily gave her a high five. Lydia, that was amazing. You spoke so naturally. Lydia couldn't stop smiling. She wasn't just speaking English anymore. She was communicating. Over the next few days, Lydia continued challenging herself. She spoke to more people, started watching movies in English without subtitles, and even began thinking in English. She noticed something exciting. English was starting to feel natural. She no longer translated words in her head before speaking. She didn't panic when she didn't know a word. Instead, she found ways to explain what she meant, just like native speakers did. One evening, as she sat with Emily at the cafe, she realized something. Emily, she said suddenly, I think I'm fluent. Emily's eyes widened. What makes you say that? Lydia thought for a moment. I don't feel scared anymore. When I talk, I don't stop to think about grammar. I just speak. Emily smiled proudly. Lydia, that's amazing. You've worked so hard for this. I knew you could do it. Lydia felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Fluency wasn't about being perfect. It was about feeling confident, about being able to express herself without fear. And she had finally reached that point. A week later, Emily had an idea. You should tell your story in English. From the beginning. Everything you've learned. Lydia's eyes widened. You mean like a speech? Exactly. Emily said. Tell me about your journey. I want to hear everything. Lydia hesitated for a moment. Could she really do this? Then she took a deep breath and began. At first, I was afraid to speak English, she said. I thought I would make mistakes and people would laugh at me. But then I started with simple words. I practiced with you, Emily. I spoke English every day. I talked to new people, even when I was scared. She paused, smiling as the memories came back. And now I feel free. I don't feel afraid anymore. I love speaking English. Emily clapped. Lydia, that was perfect. Lydia smiled. She had done it. She had become fluent in English. Not because she memorized grammar rules or studied textbooks, but because she had faced her fears, practiced every day, and never gave up. She had learned the most important lesson of all. Speaking English isn't about perfection. It's about confidence. And she had finally found hers. That night, Lydia wrote in her diary for the last time before closing the book. I'm not just learning English anymore. I am living it. She knew that her journey wasn't over. There would always be new words to learn, new challenges to face. But she also knew that she was ready for anything, because now she could speak English fluently.